Sorry, one moment. I'm just having a problem. Yes. So next, sorry, just one moment, please. Mm, Yes. Sorry. Um, uh, Within the managing diversity, you would have to understand different people think differently, and you would have to understand whether people could be political or non-political. And here we are not talking about the situation of people supporting different political views as such. We are talking about how people can be different in their points of view within how work is to be done in the organization. Um, so we would have to think of whether a person is more objective oriented or people oriented. And then here's a very interesting example of when you are a manager, you would have to consider whether uh, employees are different from you and how you will be able to manage their capabilities and use them well within your team. So, when I say different, it could mean a person who inherently is from a different city or has a different um, um, sense of humor or anything that could categorize him to be sort of outstanding from other people, or maybe there could be some people who are very intelligent and therefore they are considered to be a little bit aloof. So you would have to manage their personal ambitions and get them to harmonize or gel well with the other people in your team. You One suggestion that we would have for all managers is to, uh, at a younger level, to take the initiative, present your ideas, speak clearly about what you want to achieve, and be persistent about it. And on a similar note, when you become managers at a senior level, you would have to encourage your team members to present their ideas. And there'll be some who will be already very outspoken. There could be others who will need some encouragement from you to present their ideas. Both ways, you would have to be persistent in managing your staff. You would have to create a trust between yourself and your entire team, and that trust would mean that they'd be able to share their best and their worst experiences uh, about meetings, about work, and they'd be able to talk very clearly and openly to you. And once you build that trust, then you should avoid any negative surprises for them. So all of these come uh, with training and maturity, and you as managers would have to uh, build these personal bridges to all your staff members uh, to be successful. Here's another interesting example of how you'd have to build a bridge between yourself and your manager or your superior as well. So you would have to get their commitment about your overall strategy, how you're going to use the company's operations to your advantage. And you would have to constantly keep them informed of what you're doing. We have also spoken about the fact that you have to keep your clients informed about the same situation as well. The second is that you should constantly ask both your seniors and your juniors for feedback. Uh, अगर आप if you ask them for feedback and they give it to you openly, and sincerely, then you should hear the feedback very non-defensively without offering any justification for your actions, etc. Just hear what they have to say. Uh, be aware. Finally, we'd like to say that you should be aware of various assumptions, biases, prejudices, or stereotypes that your workforce might have or might carry, and you should find a way to resolve them, or at least, as long as you know, you'd be able to manage your team better. Um, Again, staying in the managing diversity, you would have to choose for different projects people who would help you to make a good decision. Um, and you would have to encourage each and every individual to make a good contribution. Um, you would have to choose your staff carefully so that you can encourage them to join in important meetings as well. These are very important at a junior level, and really encourage your staff, uh, especially the juniors, if they are included into important meetings. You choose who gets consulted on projects, with whom does the team socialize. This is a very important bit that most managers tend to forget about. Most teams that socialize together end up doing very well together. So you should try and, from time to time, uh, find out the personal dynamic in the team. Also, encourage them to spend a little bit of time outside the office, uh, in an informal setting, talking about their work, hearing about their experiences, and sharing that with the rest of the team. Finally, all sales staff are usually very competitive, and you would get the team members to compete as well as cooperate at all times. Again, here, managing diversity, these are all the questions that you as managers would be faced with. And these are just to give you an idea of, uh, if you were the sales team manager, how would you handle uh, how how are questions asked and disagreements expressed. So you would overall set the team for the tone for the team to be polite and uh, encourage critical discussion, but without being personally critical towards other team members. Yeah, you would have to set the tone for the work hours and punctuality norms. We spoke about the fact that punctuality doesn't necessarily mean uh, starting at 9 in the morning. It also means finishing at 5 in the evening, or whatever the work times that the company has prescribed. So, um, you would, as a team manager, lay out the punctuality norms for your staff. Uh, this is an important aspect towards day-to-day work, which is to lay out an appearance code if your company, or a dress code if your company has one. But do make sure that all your staff are dressed appropriately for the work that they do, and have a neat and clean appearance, and convey a good positive image of the company outside of when they go for client meetings. Finally, um, we spoke about that that there could be a lot of jokes and messaging going on WhatsApp, etc. Uh, and therefore, you as team manager have to be very you have to impose uh, um, a very self restraint on jokes, swearing or passing of sexist remarks, etc. Uh, uh, in not just within the office, but also over the phone or uh, over WhatsApp or Facebook, etc. I would like to. We had spoken about the fact that you, as team manager, would be responsible at some points in time for recruiting your staff as well. So it is very important that you choose your staff for the roles that you are choosing them into. When you interview your uh, potential staff, there could be some standard questions that will be asked, and there will be some tricky questions that will be asked as well. And I would like to prepare you all for your own interviews as well. Here's a very standard trick question that employers ask, which is to say that they think that the job is not well suited for you. So this is actually a very standard trick question, and they just want to see whether how you would react in an adverse situation. So finally, all of these little things would help you choose your the right squad for your job. So, one very important, and I would say, in fact, the most important thing that you can do as salespeople is to listen very carefully. And that's why I've kept the right half of the slide completely clear. This is the most important activity that you would do. Listen to your superiors, listen to your juniors, listen to your frontline sales staff, and listen to your customers. Especially listen to your customers. When you ask them a question, don't presume that you know the answer. Don't talk while they are talking. This is a very important and crucial thing that you should uh, inculcate in your team members as well. So here are some more questions that might be asked of you, or you will ask your team members before you hire them for the job. For example, what are some more specific examples of your previous sales experiences? What would you do differently now? How have you changed as a person over the years? Things like that. Um, you would actually ask them about the sales cycle that they used to have in their previous companies and how does it compare. Um, uh, this is a very important bit about following up with the prospect after the sale, and I will come to that in a later slide. Constantly keep asking yourself what new markets you and your company could likely develop, and how you would go about that process. Again, these are just simple questions that I would like to lay out. How do you feel your experience would fit into this job's needs? These are standard questions that you would ask, and these are just done to evaluate how you will, whether a person would fit into your team planning or not. Um, uh, Examples of great successes and also significant failures. Once again, I'd like to highlight the very important aspect of listening very carefully and not uh, answering or answering on behalf of your clients. So here is an example that we put down earlier, which we said that the team should be uh, a very uh, a varied combination of different people with different capabilities. Um, there could be some who are more thinking and some who are more doing. Uh, Different people would have different cultural backgrounds as well. They'd have different language capabilities, uh, different educational backgrounds. Some would be optimistic, some would inherently be a bit more realistic, and some might, in fact, turn out to be pessimistic as well. And there's um, a place in the team for all of them. Finally, we spoke about body language and how you, as a team manager, uh, would be managing the overall body language of your team members. We spoke. One of the assignments that we've given to you is to talk about age and work experience dispersion, and why it is important to have different capabilities and different work experiences within the same team. So we spoke about the fact that some people might have worked in uh, government office before they came to join your organization. Others may have worked in a private sector firm. Others may have worked in a family owned business. Some others might have worked in a multinational environment, etc. So we spoke about one of the things that we do in the corporate sector is to get people to work in tandem. And working in tandem means that you may have a buddy system, which means that the two people go for client calls together and they try and achieve their sales target together. Part of it is to teach the more junior person the way business ought to be conducted. The other way is to make sure that all discussions with clients are happening with two members of the team rather than just one person. So you may consider this as like in a corporate scenario, it may be a situation of batting or bowling pairs who are working in tandem for the same end result. We spoke about the fact that different squads have different team members have different capabilities, or different. Some may want very clear deadlines. Some work at their own pace and may renegotiate deadlines as time progresses. Some are willing to change and adapt. Others are very traditional and ritual. Some focus on tasks, others focus on relationships. Um, some like very short, succinct, um, content driven communication, while others like a very long or facilitative communication. Some may be driven by pure data and are very analytical, and others may trust their gut feeling to make a decision. This is not at all to say some people are right or wrong. It's just simply to say that, or that whoever's on the left hand side is completely different from whoever's on the right hand side. In very many situations, we have people who display different characteristics in different situations. So we are just simply saying that you would have to choose the right squad or the right mix of people who can work together and achieve success. Um, so again, we spoke about the fact that people could avoid conflict, and some others. may be willing to debate on a variety of ideas. So some are individually driven and others are group driven. So um, spoke about when you go into the sales process, you'd have to understand what you're trying to sell. So you'd have to have a very clear idea of what is the product or the service that you're trying to sell. We also spoke about the fact that in today's day and age, in fact, it is very hard to distinguish between whether you're selling a tangible product or a service. So the two examples that we spoke about in our scenario are um a newspaper and an insurance company. And in both situations, the client is receiving a piece of paper. In one case, the piece of paper has information that a client values sometimes only for one day, which is a newspaper. And in another situation, the client receives a piece of paper and the client may um, uh, use that piece of paper as a promise, which is an insurance contract. Uh, and So it is very hard to say that whether what you're providing is a product or a service. We spoke about the fact that the same company can have different personas depending on which audience it is trying to attract to. So the first symbol is the ICICI Lombard General Insurance symbol, which is towards addressed towards uh, corporate clients. The second one is ICICI Lombard Nibhaye Wade, which is addressed towards a retail market, and the ICICILombard.com, which is the online uh, personality of this company, which says quick, easy, and smart. We spoke about the fact that the same company can have a presence in different uh, insurance categories and sell through different channels. So, auto insurance, health insurance, overseas travel, overseas student medical, home insurance, corporate solutions, and rural weather insurance. All of these have different uh, audiences and could be sold through different channels. And therefore, depending on which channel it's being sold through, the company would have a different personality. We spoke about for those who joined late. I'm just clarifying that we are quickly running through the fourth session of sales team management, and this is really just a recap of all the things we have done in the past. And so so it's pretty fast, but we spoke about the fact that depending on the product or the service that is being sold, there are three dimensions that we would look at as a sales team manager. Whether we are trying to sell in what location and what is the topography, what is the sales channel that we are using to reach out to our customer, and the customer type itself. So, what do I mean by location or topography? Which means that we could say that we are in the different zones, north, south, east, and west. Let's say we are in the northern zone, then we say the sub regional, which could mean NCR, Punjab, Haryana, Uttarakhand, etc. Within each of these, let's say the NCR, you could have three zones, which would mean Greater Noida, New Delhi, Gurgaon, etc. Again, within the zones, you could break it down into four parts, and whether they are rural or urban. If they're rural, then we go down to the district level. Uh, Sales channels. Sales channels could be of different types. This is the second dimension that we spoke about, which could be a retail sales channel or a direct sales channel or sales made through channel partners. Finally, we just go back to this part, which is the customer type. So the customer type could be either a government customer, which could be either a central or a state customer. It could be a private industry, small, medium, or large scale, and or it could be a multinational company as well. Finally, we spoke about the fact that depending on the type of insurance or the product that we're trying to sell, we can distinguish between who will be selling it. So, for example, uh, if we're selling to large scale infrastructure like ports, airports, or buildings, or if we're selling to manufacturing or to the construction industry, and finally to services itself. Here is the process for lead generation. That means you would segment the market, reach out to your customers, and get data from different sources. We had spoken about the situation of Dainik Bhaskar and how they went about creating a very successful a very successful newspaper business in India. So Dainik Bhaskar was a 40-year-old group with daily circulation of 350,000 newspapers in MP only. This is in 1996, and in 2004, the daily circulation had gone tenfolds from 350,000 to 3 million, 3.5 million, and in different states as well, from MP to Chhattisgarh, Rajasthan, Haryana, Chandigarh, and Gujarat. With these circulations, Dainik Bhaskar became one of the top 25 daily newspapers in the world. So, how did a newspaper that was essentially a Hindi only newspaper go on to become 10 times its size in about 8 years? And it reinvented its personality depending on the state that it went into. So the Dainik Bhaskar morphed into the Divya Bhaskar, the Saurashtra Samachar, Prabhat Kiran, Business Bhaskar, DB Star, and DNA. I think we had spoken about these, so I'm not going to spend much on this case study. We spoke about the fact that the Dainik Bhaskar group went about to determine the demographic profile of its readers, whether they were a mix of literate and semi-literate, whether they were students, women, senior citizen, married couples, etc. It also determined their motive for reading. In some cases, it was the news itself. Others wanted to read the local news. Other people wanted to read the national or the international news. Some others wanted to read the economic news. Maybe they invested in shares. Real estate professionals and auto industry, which means buying and selling of second-hand cars, were interested in the local advertising, and then finally matrimonials. What Dainik Bhaskar did was it created a design of a main edition and its supplement and took it to market to show the customers what they thought they would like to see. Um, so I'm just going to skip through this because this I think you guys can all either read by yourself, but I can tell you that, for example, the Dainik in Chandigarh, uh, the in Chandigarh before the Dainik entered, uh, English newspapers sold about 6 times more than the Hindi newspapers. And what none of the newspaper companies had realized that uh, everyone in or the reader populace in Chandigarh was comfortable with Hindi, but were only buying the English paper because the quality of editing was much better. Uh, so what the Dainik did was to create a Hinglish newspaper, and after the Dainik was launched, they didn't. They not just took away some of the existing market, but also went out to create a new market as such. So it went from 54% readership before the Dainik was launched to about 61.4%. So I'm just going to skip through this slide because we have time is not on our side today. We spoke about how to create a sales budget and how to create its target. So we um, we had done an exercise for sales budgeting, and we spoke about the fact that what we should do while we are budgeting uh, for our maybe next year or for the team. The first thing we have to do is to write out an idea of the overall costs. Costs are much easier uh, to formulate or to visualize. So you write down all your costs first, and after that, you can have an idea of the number of units that ought to be sold based on the profitability of each and every individual item sold. So that way, you'll be able to understand that uh, if you're trying to achieve a successful outcome um, based on the market perception or expenses, you can then create a rough business scale as to how many similar products you might have to sell so that you can have an idea as a sales manager of how much time and effort your team will have to expend in order to achieve the sales budget. We also spoke about the fact that the selling price is usually constrained by competition. So, अगर आप सोचते हैं that we'll launch a blockbuster product in the market and we'll charge ₹100 for it, whereas traditionally everyone has been happy using an a maybe an cheaper product, then you'd be able to know for sure कि you can't charge as much. So the selling price is usually constrained uh, or benchmarked by competition. Cost of goods sold is usually variable costs. And then we spoke about the fact that we have to determine what are our fixed costs and what are our variable costs. So Under most circumstances, costs of goods sold are a variable cost, as also indirect costs. You would have to do this entire estimate in terms of the number of units you would have to sell based on the seasonal variations, whether quarterly or annually. Then we spoke about the fact that if you don't have an idea of the salary of the sales staff or fixed expenses of the company, then you could determine each of these on a one third basis, which is to say that, uh, or if you're starting your own private business and you want to figure out key how much sales do we have to generate for the business to be successful, you can determine the cost overall of setting up the business first, and presume that that would be the fixed expenses of the company. One third of the sales would have to be apportioned for your own salary, and another one third would be contribution to the profit or towards the shareholders of the company. So based on these models, you can then create a rough sales pipeline and see whether your project is likely to be successful or not. Finally, I'm just going to skip the slide, but it's to give you an idea of how expenses could be determined um, variable and fixed expenses. You would have to determine each of these and then put them into your Excel sheets. So I'd like to just take a break here and just ask all of you if you're happy with the pace at which we're going or any suggestions, etc. Anything that you might like to ask me? Sorry, I'm muting myself, and I'd like to lay out the questions for you. Just take 5 minutes of questions from you guys. So I I don't have any answers from anyone or any questions as well. So I presume that we're all okay. So here I'd like to talk about the sales process. And we spoke about the fact that there is a sales process, which is a Spanko, and we would like we'd like to add two dimensions to it and call it Spanko plus plus. So we say that we roughly have an idea of who our clients might be, which is called the suspect stage S for Spanko. Uh, this is the phase at which, if you were to call 100 customer would be customers, you might likely have a 2% success rate. So this is really just like um, shooting out in the sky and hoping to find a client. So, not very strong possibility of a success in this phase. The second one is where prospecting, where you have a firm idea that yes, these set of people may be interested in my in the product that I'm offering. Sorry, one moment, please. Sorry, apologies. Um, yes, I'm back. The second stage we spoke about was the P stage, prospect, where there's a possibility, a much better possibility of a successful outcome. In this case, um, roughly 1 in 3 prospects might have a good possibility.
यहाँ पे
Um, so we said that even if you have a client who might be able to refer somebody who might be interested in your services, ask for that, and your chances of success go up drastically. So from 2% to 1 in 5 clients, which is a referral type situation, if a client might suggest to you. So you have a 20% possibility of success. If, on the other hand, the client actually is willing to do an introduction for you, whereby he doesn't just give you a phone number, but he picks up the phone and calls up a person and says that I think this person might have a product which is suitable for you, or something like that, or a face-to-face meeting, the chance of success can go up to even about 60%. That maybe, or even 50% would mean that 1 in 2 times you might have a successful outcome. So this is the P. The uh, and A is that you finally approach the client that you think might likely need your services, and you negotiate with them. Uh, After that, there is a closing and an order, and after sales service begins. Throughout this entire process, I would like to say that you, as sales staff, are uh, the feedback mechanism between the company and your would be prospects. So constantly, you would be in the process of communication and reporting. Uh, does anyone have a question here? So this is the reason we've put these arrows here. That sales staff create the process of communication and reporting. Communication is the outward bound leg. That means you take the information from your company to your customer and explain to them what plans you might have, what products they might be interested in, what services they might like. And reporting would be where, for example, you take back information that the client has given to you and go back to your company and say, we have to rework our proposal, or we have to change our product according to this. client's requirements, etc. So this is the entire process of communication and reporting. We spoke about the fact that communication and reporting in Bhaskar was done very strongly and very efficiently. This is a slide that I'd like to focus on, which is to say that the Dainik Bhaskar team engaged with customers very efficiently, um, and they arrived promptly in the morning at about 6 o'clock. Uh, Created a personal rapport with the clients so that they could create some comfort, uh, and utilize their input to create a product that the client wanted. They could also elicit um, um, some positive reaction from their clients, which was asking for an advance subscription and also confirming or guaranteeing them that the uh, prices would be lower than the newsstand prices and an immediate refund if clients were not satisfied. So there was a positive action towards harnessing clients' interest and not just simply doing a market survey, but actually producing a product that clients wanted, reporting it back to their staff, and a positive action towards completing a sale. So, what we say here is that the feedback was summarized and analyzed by the editorial team, reporting and feature teams to determine the overall content and the layout. Finally, we spoke about that all sales staff respond to incentives, and incentives could be either monetary or non-monetary. So, in the event that they are monetary, there could be a promise of a job, there could be bonuses and other financial incentives, uh, or there could be reward programs specifically for individuals or set to specific sales targets or milestones. Now, what about the non monetary ones? The non monetary could mean, for example, if you were to achieve a certain target, you would be sent for a training session, maybe in the company headquarters, abroad, or something like, or to a different city uh, in a training program. Sorry. Sorry, there was some uh, voice disturbance, but I can assure you it wasn't from my end. So, can you hear me clearly now? Okay, thanks. We spoke about the fact that there could be incentives which are monetary, which is related to money, and others that are non-monetary. So the first one could be a training session. The second one could be that you get the feeling that now you belong to the team and the team itself should win, and that itself is your um, incentive, the unity of purpose. In the case of Dainik Bhaskar, we spoke about the fact that uh, they all 200 to 300 surveyors used to begin their mornings with a prayer and an overall purpose that they would achieve by the end of the day. And this beginning of the day was very incentivizing for the team to support or to achieve their objectives. Um, Second, after that, they were supported by their supervisors, closely monitoring success. failure, and behavioral aberrations. So, what do we mean by behavioral aberrations? Which means that maybe you had a difficult situation and a client spoke badly to you, and maybe you also reacted badly to a client. So all these things would lead to the managers to step in, and they would counsel their staff so that behavioral aberrations were minimized from their team. And this also led to a personal growth. That means the team members, they became more mature, they became aware of how they have to react and how they have to perform in the field. So these are all non-monetary uh, incentives that the counseling provided. Uh, then we spoke about the possibility to uh, have a buddy system whereby you work with uh, either a more successful or a more senior member to learn about how to conduct yourself in a client meeting, etc. Finally, at the end of the day, you'd have sit downs and reviews and sharing of observations by managers. And most finally, at the end of a couple of days, or maybe a month, or at the end of a certain project, you might invite celebrities to come and talk to the overall teams, and this element of having fun or to be invited for a movie where uh, a celebrity was endorsing their own movie was to some of the staff in Dainik Bhaskar a very big non-monetary incentive. So within monetary incentives, there are two types of compensation plans. You can have either a variable plan or a fixed plan. We spoke about both these. So we spoke about the fact that a fixed plan is support salespeople when the market is down. It can help you accurately forecast costs. So when you lay out your assignments, or when you lay out your business plans, even in future, you can use both fixed, variable, or a mixed plan compensation to determine how you wish to utilize your or incentivize your staff in a monetary way. We spoke about the fact that the advantage of a fixed plan is that it avoids revenue disputes because हर sales staff को उतनी ही salary मिलनी है irrespective the of how the business came in, and therefore it avoids revenue disputes. If you have a variable plan, you can have revenue disputes between the various members of the team. A fixed plan also ensures that there is good after sales support because there's no particular incentive to run after new business all the time. So, sales staff then offer good after sales service. Uh, I heard somebody's mic go on. So, does anyone have a suggestion or a question? Please feel free to ask because it's our last session. Yes, please tell me. Okay, so I don't think I have a question. Maybe somebody's mic is just on. So we'll keep going forward. We go to the difference between a fixed and a variable plan. So a variable plan maximizes sales production activity, and in this case, the pay is fully aligned to the company's goals of revenue generation. Variable plan also attracts only the most aggressive sales staff. Isme each person will get only a certain commission of the sales that they produce and could lead to low customer retention. It and because it could lead to a situation where sales staff are constantly running after new clients and therefore they are not doing after sales service. So an ideal plan that uh, most companies would tend to follow is a mixed plan, which would have 60% fixed compensation and 40% variable compensation. We spoke about the fact that variable bonuses are subject to companies' budgets and meeting of revenue and overall profit targets. They work very well for a company in need for growth and help to maximize the potential of the territory. Variable bonuses also um, ensure that the tenure of sales uh, persons, because for example you could have a variable bonus that could be granted at the end of the financial year. So if for example it's October and the variable bonus is granted in March, then most likely most sales staff, even if they have an opportunity to change their jobs, will hold out till March so that they can get their variable bonus. So there are these are some thoughts that I had put down, and I mean, you as sales managers can consider these all of these things, which is to eliminate the caps on compensation, uh, but freeze base salaries. This means to say that we shouldn't, depending on how high the sales go, we should be willing to grant a variable possibility, a variable uh, income based on the salary, based on the business that is produced for the company, and but we should freeze the base pay so that the base pay is consistent and common for all people, all salesmen in an organization. We can adjust the base salaries to the cost of living. So, for example, Mumbai might be more expensive than Delhi, or Delhi may be more expensive than Chennai, etc. So, we could adjust the base salary of the sales staff to a particular city or to its cost of living. Um, a lot of these points actually don't need very much. Uh, I think I have a question. Just sorry, one moment. I'm working. To know. Okay, so I have a very interesting question. Um, one of the students says, "I'm working in HDFC education loan. So I want to know about education loan, how to sell my product, and how to approach customers, and how to increase new customers." Does anyone have any thoughts of this of the education loan market? Sham, I uh, does here I'm asking you a question back. Your does HDFC provide education loan for overseas colleges as well? Shama, I've just asked you another question. I would have one idea that you could use. Uh, you could say, speaking to HDFC and doing some on campus road shows in class 12 for students who will be entering college in next year. Shama, I've tried to answer your question. I like your think. I like your. Um, so I had a question here to say that somebody is trying to sell education loans and want to know how to sell the product and approach customers and increase new customers. Um, so my thought on this is that the best thing that you could do is that you could approach students in class 12th, uh, the children who will be entering college soon. And there could be a situation where very many children are not deciding to go through education or college education because they may not have the funds to attend college or so by meeting them in class 12th and telling them about your product, you might be able to meet a lot of the customers who may be uh, who would have been happy to take over the loan, uh, the credit, the education loan, and doing this at in a captive audience where means in one day you might be able to meet 800 students would be the easiest thing to do. So that would be my thought of how to approach uh, education through via the schools approaching students. Uh, so we spoke about compensation governance, which means that once you, hi Sham, I have tried to answer your question, Sham. Uh, so I've tried to answer your question. Please, could you consider and let me know what you think? And if you don't think it's a valid answer, then you could also tell us or um, suggest what may be the best way to meet the maximum number of students who might be willing to take on maximum amount of loan. Compensation governance clearly just means that you make the overall process of compensation or incentivization, the monetary incentivization, transparent. So, how can it be transparent? Wherein once you clarify who will be eligible and when they will be eligible to receive compensations. Uh, and split, how will you be able to split commissions between different teams or different team members? You also lay out the ground rules about how disputes will be settled and who will make final decisions. You tell them what, at what date or what specific dates can they expect the payment of the commissions or bonuses, etc., and whether and under what special circumstances can the compensation plan be discontinued or changed. Within the compensation governance, you would have to have a very clear idea of when sales, when what happens when salespeople will leave the company in three or four different broad categories. For example, if they uh, leave to join a competitor, will they or will they not be eligible to receive their bonus? If they were to leave the company and maybe for personal reasons, like if they're, for example, their spouse is being relocated abroad or uh, uh, and therefore they can't work or they have to shift abroad, etc., or to look after their children, etc. So the compensation governance procedure should lay out very clearly key under what circumstances compensation or the compensation will be granted and what circumstance it won't be granted. Um, we spoke about the fact that um, salespeople, especially for large multi-year contracts, maybe for example, if you're selling shipbuilding services, you may have a situation where uh, bonuses will be paid over long many number of years. Initially, when the business itself is booked, the second could be when the product is completed and shipped, or milestone invoices are settled, things like that. So, compensation governance again makes the entire process transparent um, and clear to everyone. So, how do you know if your compensation plan is uh, approved? There are three or four easy ways to test it. The first one is you plan and explain the plan to your team, and everyone understands it. The second is that most of the team members find the plans to be fair. Third one is if at the end of the year your salaries have actually gone up compared to previous years, then you know your compensation plan is working. And number four, that your top performing salespeople decide not to leave. We spoke. Finally, we speak about results, and we say that for any sales team to determine whether it has been successful or not, it has to chart them on three specific parameters. The first one is to motivate them. The second one is to align. Each and every person gets a small target that they have to complete throughout the year, and you set the targets in such a way that the overall team uh, that the overall team achieves the target that it had set out to. And finally, perform, which means to calibrate goals. So now I've reached to the last 3 or 4 slides of the deck, and I would like to say that here everyone should bear in mind very carefully about how India is changing. And we spoke about the fact that sports marketing, which never used to be mainstream uh, activity in India, has now become really very mainstream, starting from the IPL, the badminton league, kabaddi, soccer, etc. So sports marketing is something of a field that you guys can consider. Insurance, of course, as a service. I'm sure you have read um, through the RHP to know how big this opportunity could be. And finally, there are all sorts of new companies in the Indian market selling consumer products. For example, Patanjali. You get to see some brands such as cycle brand Agarbatti on IPL uniforms. So again, all of these are consumer-centric brands, and um, you should be able to determine how life in India is changing very quickly, and you can also create businesses or join businesses in each of these disciplines. Finally, we spoke about the fact that a lot of business is moving online, and therefore malls as place of retail uh, sales areas is reducing quite drastically, but they might reorient themselves to become uh, entertainment destinations. Finally, just some secrets to success, and I wish you all a very successful career ahead. The first, these are just simple statements by wise old people. The first one is, don't find a fault, find a remedy. And leadership and learning are indispensable to each other. That means you have to constantly keep leading and constantly keep learning. Uh, just some examples. When you get into client calls, don't assume that you know what the other person was about to say. Don't finish their sentences. Um, give your full attention to your clients and really just listen and don't try to be defensive. So that actually completes our slide deck uh, for this session. And we still have about 10 odd minutes. So if anybody would like to ask any questions, I will leave uh, the floor to all of you. And if you would like to ask any questions, and if not, then I wish you all the very best. And um, not just for this year, but for success in the future as well. So please feel free to ask your questions. I have a question already. Yes, thanks, Mohammed. Najmuddin, please tell me.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Good evening.
Sir, of compensation.
हाँ जी
Firstly is
please.
fixed plan and second is the variable plan.
हाँ हाँ.
So, sir, have we started one company.
Okay.
Suppose that mm, the
Yes.
starting of the cl- cloth shop.
Okay.
How who will be better the apply the plan?
Clothes shop.
Fixed plan, yeah.
Okay.
Plan, yeah, variable plan. Who will be better, sir?
So I think.
Condition is, sir, condition is that firstly the new shop.
Hmm.
The second thing is attract the customer.
Hmm.
The who will be success on the business purpose is that.
For me, मैं आपको बताऊं, I think अगर आप if you are a new company, it would be better to have most of your sales staff on a variable plan, because उससे क्या होगा कि let's say for example हम अपना if we look at our P&L today, तो
Yeah,
we are already paying a rent to run a clothes shop. Now,
yeah,
if we start paying all the sales staff a fixed salary also, uh,
yeah,
we may end up in a situation where if we don't sell enough, we will
yeah.
for sure be in a loss situation. So,
Sir, one thing, sir.
हाँ जी,
Capi- my capital was very less, sir.
okay.
Yeah,
Which is why it's even better कि अगर आप variable compensation रखेंगे ना कि if every sales staff for every 1,000 rupees product that they sell, they may receive maybe 100 rupees or 150 rupees, 10 या 15% जो भी हमने mentally रखा है. So we may decide to compensate them via a variable plan, which means that there is pressure on them to somehow find a customer and sell the product,
yeah.
and only then they get paid. So I think for a startup company, for a low capital company, it is always better to have a variable compensation plan,
Okay,
which means that if they perform what they are supposed to perform, only then they get paid.
okay.
आपका क्या व्यू है?
Thank you, sir. सर ये मेरा भी यही व्यू है सर.
ओके.
ये
थोड़ी सी मुश्किल ये आएगी कि आपको जब आप लोग ढूंढने जाएंगे who will work on that basis, you will find it difficult to find such staff.
yeah. मैं turning to the business.
हाँ जी.
No.
Yes. Anybody else? So I don't think anybody has any other questions. Um, if you do, please feel free to ask. We still have a few minutes left. So I don't think anybody has any other questions to ask. So in that case, what we'll do is we'll wind up this session. And if you do have any, hi, yes, hi, Sham. Yes, yes, Sham. आप साइबर कैफे खोलना चाह रहे हैं? Yes, Sham. Oh, okay, okay. Hmm. Ah, good question, Sham. Um, I think Sham, अगर हम अगर हम विलेज में साइबर कैफे खोलें तो ऐसा नहीं है कि नहीं चलेगा. आई आई थिंक इट्स अ गुड आइडिया. लेकिन उसको थोड़ा सा हमारे को मॉडिफाई करना पड़ेगा टू सूट द विलेज एनवायरनमेंट. एंड व्हेन आई से दैट व्हाट आई मीन इज कि देखिए, देयर इज वन थिंग दैट अ साइबर कैफे could work really well in a village environment is कि depending on which where you are planning to open the internet uh, um, की जो facility है means to be able to have high speed internet, uh, to maybe print out things, a lot of these things, और उसके अराउंड जो सुविधाएं हैं ये हमारे को देनी पड़ेंगी. Hi, sorry. या सो श्याम, मैं ये कह रहा था कि आपको जो प्रोडक्ट्स हैं, so internet and the connectivity, all these things are very important and you should provide that in a village environment. लेकिन the like a typical cyber cafe जैसे बरिस्ता है या कैफे कॉफी डे वगैरह है, तो आई डोंट नो हाउ पॉपुलर coffee type maybe in a village environment. तो जो फूड और ड्रिंक्स का जो वो है वो आपको विलेज एनवायरनमेंट के लिए मॉडिफाई करना पड़ेगा. तब आई थिंक इट कुड बी अ वेरी सक्सेसफुल कॉम्बिनेशन. The atmosphere, the food and drinks with the of the village environment suited to the audience, and the facilities और जो सुविधाएं हैं of a cyber cafe for people to browse the internet, for people to come to the cafe to talk to each other. These things in a good environment, I think it can work really well. और जो सिटीज में अगर आप साइबर कैफे खोलने की कोशिश करेंगे, यू विल फाइंड द कॉस्ट ऑफ रनिंग इट, taking on rental, etc., is quite expensive. So, Sham, I've tried to answer your question, and it's a good thought. And जरूर आप try कीजिए. But I suggest कि you change the concept a little bit to make it suit the village environment better. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, thanks, Najmuddin. In that case, thank you to all of you.